Welcome back. In today's lesson, we're going to be tackling a new chapter of Java, which is JavaFX. Now, JavaFX is an excellent pedagogical tool for learning about object-oriented programming with a lot more real-world applications, since many times people say, well, why is it so interesting to just be typing into the console? I want to actually see my work in a pictographical format. JavaFX allows us to do that. JavaFX is a new framework for developing Java GUI programs. The JavaFX API is an excellent example of how object-oriented principles are applied. First, we're going to be talking about the basics of JavaFX programming. Second, we're going to be talking about how JavaFX demonstrates object-oriented design and programming methods. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the framework of JavaFX, and we're going to be discussing the JavaFX components and their relationships. We're going to learn how to develop simple GUI programs using layout panes, buttons, labels, text fields, colors, fonts, images, image views, and shapes. Now, you might have looked around and you might see that there are conflicting views on how to create GUI-based Java programs. First, you might see something called the Abstract Windows Kit, or AWT. AWT was the first way that Java allowed people to make GUI classes, and it was fine for developing simple graphical user interfaces, but not for developing complex, comprehensive GUI projects. In addition, it's right there in the name, the AWT was prone to platform-specific bugs, and AWT user interface components ran into many problems. The AWT was replaced by a more robust, versatile, and flexible library called Java Swing, or Swing Components. This is probably the one you might have heard of. Swing components are painted directly on canvases using Java code. Swing components depend a lot less on the target platform and use less of the native GUI's resources. Swing is used for developing desktop GUI applications, and it's now completely been replaced by a new GUI platform called JavaFX. JavaFX incorporates modern GUI technologies to allow you to develop rich internet applications. A rich internet application is a web application that's designed to deliver the same features and functionality normally associated with a desktop application. A JavaFX application can run seamlessly through a desktop or on a web browser. In addition, JavaFX has support for multi-touch, touch-enabled devices such as tablets and smartphones, and it has built-in 2D, 3D animation support, video audio playback, and runs as a standalone program from an application or from a browser. We're going to be talking about Java GUI using JavaFX for a couple of reasons. First, JavaFX is much simpler to learn, especially when we're first learning, still discovering some new concepts in Java. In addition, Swing is kind of dead, since it will no longer receive any further enhancement from Oracle, so JavaFX is the new GUI toolkit for developing cross-platform, rich internet applications on desktop computers, handheld devices, and across the web. Now, the basic structure of a JavaFX program is a little bit different to what we've normally learned. So, let's demonstrate this. We're going to create a new class, new Java project. We're going to call this JavaFX. Inside JavaFX, we're going to create a new class file, and we're going to call this class file myJavaFX. Now, we will have the main method, but you'll notice that the main method is going to be a little bit different than our normal main method. The main method is only needed if you're running in an IDE with limited JavaFX support. It's not needed if you're running from the command line. Now, Eclipse tends to have fairly limited JavaFX support, and for redundancy, in case you are working with an IDE that doesn't have full JavaFX support. If you were running your program from the command line, you actually wouldn't need this, and the command line is probably the most complex way and the most efficient way to run some JavaFX programs. But for now, we're going to keep with Eclipse. So the first thing we're going to need to do is make sure inside our main method, and usually you can actually put the main method to the bottom now, since it's probably the least important method that we'll have in JavaFX, you only need one thing inside your main method. All you need to be able to say is application.launch. And then inside the parentheses you would say args. Then you end your statement and you're actually done with your main method. You will have an error for now. That error will go away later on, and when we import the appropriate classes. Now, this is because the main method in a limited IDE will just tell the IDE where to look or where to run from, and the application.launch just runs the rest of the program, and you'll see how that'll implement itself. So the first thing we're going to need to do is import the specific classes we require. Now JavaFX requires a lot of importing. You can use wildcard imports, however wildcard imports sometimes run into issues when you're working with JavaFX, so for now we're actually just going to be doing manual imports, specific imports for all the classes we're going to need. You can need anywhere from 4 to more. In this case we're only going to be importing 4. Those are the 4 main ones that you'll probably be using the most. First of all, we need to import the JavaFX, and now whenever we talk about JavaFX classes, we're always going to say JavaFX. It won't say Java first, it'll be JavaFX. JavaFX.application.application with a capital letter this time on the A. And you'll notice now the error has gone away as a result of us importing the appropriate package, or appropriate class file. After that, we need to import the JavaFX .scene with a capital S this time. Then we need to import the JavaFX.scene.control.button. And finally, we need to import the JavaFX.stage.stage. Now you'll see how each of these manifests itself into our program as we start implementing them. So the first thing we're going to need to say is actually inside our public class myJavaFX, we need to first put in a extension, because the myJavaFX class, in the same way that every single class up till now has always inherited the object class, superclass, we need to make sure every single JavaFX class we work with extends the application class. In the same way that the object class is always the base class for almost every single class we worked with previously, in this case the application class is going to be the subclass, or the superclass for every single JavaFX program we develop. After that, we now have to override the method called the start method. So we'll put in our override annotation, and after that it's a public void start. Now the public void start method functions similarly to the main method with our previous programs. It just tells the JavaFX program where to start looking from. The application launch will pretty much just point to this start method, and then the program will know to start running from there. It takes the arguments of a stage, primary stage. This primary stage, once again, we'll be coming into a little bit later on in this program. Then, inside our curly braces, we're going to need to create a new button. The new button is going to be part of a scene. We're going to create a scene and place a button inside this scene. So we're going to say button bt OK. This is our reference variable because it's an object, just like any other object we work with. We're going to say new button, so we're creating a new object, and it's going to take the parameter of a string OK. Then we're going to have a scene, and that's equal to a new scene, and it'll take the parameters of bt OK, and then let's say we also want to take a parameter of 200 and 250. Now I'll explain all of this after we run it for the first time. It'll make a lot more sense. Just bear with me for this little bit. Then we're going to say primary stage dot set title, and then we're going to give it a name. This is going to be a string name, so let's say my JavaFX, and then we are going to have another primary stage method, primary stage, and then it's going to be the method setScene, and it'll take the parameter of scene. And finally, we're going to have primary stage dot show, which will take no parameters. Now let's try and run our program. We're going to run a JavaFX program just like any other program we've worked with. you go up to the run button, press run, and then, except instead of looking at something inside your console, you're actually going to get a separate pop-up window. This will show up as a Java icon, and you'll notice now we have the window that has an OK button inside it. It'll highlight it when you're on it, and then you can see that it has a name. That name is a little bit truncated, but if we zoom into it, you can now see that it says My JavaFX right there. The size, the default size, is what we provided it. By saying 200 by 250, we provided the size we'd like. So we said we wanted this to be 200 pixels by 250 pixels. It reads width followed by height. In addition, now let's go through every single value we just created. So first, we're going to look at the stage primary stage. Now, the stage primary stage as the argument to the start method is just a way of creating a first stage. If you wanted to create other stages, you would have to just say stage is equal to new stage with no parameters. But the start method is intelligent enough to have a parameter where if you provide it a stage, it'll automatically create a stage. And a stage, think about it like on a theater. A stage is your main area. It's where all the actors are. Then you have a scene. The scene might be your set, where you have a background, you have what you want the user to what you want the audience to mainly see, and your button would be equivalent to the actors in a theater analogy. So if you had the stage primary stage, this creates a new stage. That's the equivalent of saying I want to create a window. If you want to create multiple windows, let's say you want to create two windows. One window would say OK, and it would have a title of My JavaFX. Let's say you want the other window to say stage, and this is how we're going to create a new window first, is equal to new stage, no parameters. Then you would say stage.setTitle, which, just like it sounds, gives the window its name. So you might have noticed that here, the name was My JavaFX. In the same way, if you create a stage, you can set the title for your second stage, and that could be, for example, second stage. So when we ran this, if we run this program, instead of saying My JavaFX, it would say second stage. After that, you would set a scene with a button in the new stage. So you would say stage.setScene, and then inside our set scene, we want to create a new scene, and inside our new scene, we want to create a new button. Our button should say, for example, new stage, and then we want this window, let's say, to be 500 by 600 pixels long. Then, if we say stage.show, and we run our program now, you'll notice a difference here, because we have two windows now. The first window just says OK like it did previously, but because we said stage equals new stage, we created a second window. Then we said stage.setTitle, second stage, so you'll notice that the window's name is second stage. And then if we look at the stage.setScene, we created a new scene, which I'll remind you is equivalent to saying we created a new set. So we created a area, like this box, in which we could put buttons, or as we'll see later on, layout panes or anything else. Then we created a new button. That new button said new stage. And then we specified a width and height. So we said 500 pixels by 600 pixels high. And you'll notice that it's much bigger than the original one, which was 200 by 250. In addition, you'll see that you have to actually either tell the user to close the window, because JavaFX programs don't close by default. If you were to say that, if you said close on a JavaFX window, you have to make sure you close it, because otherwise you'll just keep on filling up your computer with multiple instances of similar programs. So every time you're done with the program, it's good practice to just close the windows, since they're no longer being used. Now let's go back to, now that we know what a stage is, let's keep talking about the methods we used here. The launch method was the launch method that we used inside our main method is a static method defined in the application class for launching a standalone JavaFX application. The main method, as I mentioned, is not needed if you run the program from the command line, but for some IDEs you're going to need it. When you run a JavaFX application without the main method, the Java JVM is smart enough to know that it should automatically invoke the launch method to run the application. The main class overrides the start method, as we see here, defined in the application class, which is why we extended the application class, since the start method is one of the most useful methods we have, so we extend the application class so we can override it and therefore start our program. And then, after the JavaFX application is launched, the JVM constructs an instance of the class using its noArg constructor. That is the myJavaFX class. And then it invokes the start method. The start method normally places the UI controls in a scene and displays the scene in a stage. Then we create a new button right here. The button object is created and then it's placed inside a scene object. The scene object is created using the constructor node_width_height, the node being what you want to display. The constructor specifies the width and height and places the node in this scene. The stage object, as I mentioned, is a window. A stage object is called a primary stage when it's automatically created by the JVM when the application is launched. That's done right here because when you use the start method and you provide it a stage, it'll automatically create a new stage window object, and that'll be the primary stage. You might think of a stage as a platform, to put it another way, to support scenes and nodes as actors perform their scenes. Now you can also create additional stages, as we did right here, and then the mechanics still transfer over. So you can still use the setTitle, setScene methods, and we use the show method, which is what allows us to actually display it. Because you can create as many instances or as many windows as you like, but to display them, you have to make sure you have this show method. That's the only way you'll actually display it out to the user. Otherwise, they'll be there, but invisible. So, hopefully you found this program useful, and hopefully you found our initial basic structure discussion on a JavaFX program invigorating. To summarize, in today's lesson, we talked about why we are talking about JavaFX versus Swing or the AWT, the basic structure of a JavaFX program, the classes we have to make sure we import, how we might not need the main method depending on what type of environment you're running it from, how you might need to specify that you want to launch the program using the application.launch method in the main method, and that's about it. We talked about how you need to extend the application and you need to override the start method. We talked about the stages and how a stage is like a window, and how the start method creates a primary or default stage. We talked about how to create a new button, how to display that button, and how we show all of these things back out to the user. And we talked about the relevance of a stage, a scene, and a node such as a button. So hopefully you found this lesson useful, and hopefully you're able to start working with a little bit of JavaFX now that we've discussed these basic topics.